Hi, everyone, and welcome to the October 4th meeting of the Westford Budget Task Force. So we're calling to order, and we've got a couple of minutes to review. We have minutes from the 5th, 6th, and 13th of September. And also the Benchmarking and Efficiency Working Group has a July 17th set of minutes. I don't know if anyone has any comments on those minutes.
I just wanted to check. I only sent the July ones around this morning. Was everyone able to quickly glance at those? Christina, Jenny. Okay. Good. Amy. Thanks.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and vote on those first? Because I guess the people who would vote would be those on that subcommittee. So yeah, I guess I'll call for the vote, but not vote. So all those in favor.
So motion to approve.
Okay, and a second. All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, great. Hey, Erica.
Hello, how are you?
Good. We're just going over the minutes. So also minutes for the 5th, 6th, and 13th. Do folks feel ready to vote on those? Okay, I'll entertain them. Okay, second.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And Erica's abstaining. Okay. So first, let me say, I spent some time going through the document this morning and looked at some things over the weekend. It looks like it's in really good shape. So thanks to everyone who's been, leaning into that. I know it's a huge undertaking. I didn't count how many pages we're at, but it's long. So our task in front of us now is to migrate the document to its final form or near final form, late stage draft form by Tuesday, at which point we'd like to send out a draft to the committees. It will either be final or it may have some sections that will be marked as still under draft. We'll make that decision, or Valerie will make that decision as we get closer, but there's a lot there. Maybe I will start off just by seeing if anyone had any reactions to the executive summary that a few of us worked on over the weekend. The goal there was that people are only going to read one page, which many people may do, that they get the general idea of it and have access to sort of some of the most powerful suggestions that have emerged from the work. Yep, Erica.
Yeah, I did share with you and Shayna some of my concerns about the cannabis, and I guess Shayna responded that it's not our job really to make the judgment call of whether or not it's right for the town, but only to point out whether or not we can save money. And I guess I'm not sure how I feel about that, but I understand the sentiment, and I guess there is some good thinking behind that. But I do want to share that I read a Globe article. The magazine, Globe magazine, just before I left, said that the prices and the money associated with cannabis in Massachusetts is being quite variable and volatile, and it is scared away some actors but not scared away others. And it seems to me that it's not the sure thing that it once was. And in terms of municipal benefit from the excise taxes. So if we do recommend further exploration of this, I would certainly want to make sure that is clear, that this is not necessarily the game changer that it was for many of the municipalities that reaped such high rewards. And then the other comment that I had was on the ambulances, and I recall sitting in with Christina and Shayna with Commissioner Farg on the ambulance and whether or not we go after some of the delinquent payers of the ambulance fees. And I do recall there was, I think it was 2005, we had a town meeting vote that said we were not going to charge citizens. And so I think when it comes to our the tenants that we set up in the front of the report saying that we should be meeting their expectations. If the town expects that they're not going to be charged, then we should take that into account when we make our recommendations. And they don't currently expect to. I know that they do go after some folks on the delinquent payees of ambulance fees if they felt that it was a frivolous call, which I certainly agree with. I mean, we don't want our ambulances sent willy-nilly about town. So I certainly agree with them pursuing some of them. But when it comes to things that are life and death, like ambulances, I just have a real concern about recommending that we charge more for ambulances, because people don't really have a choice whether or not they're going to call an ambulance. Either you need it or you don't, and it could be a life or death question. And, that just gives me a little bit of heartburn. So those are the two comments that I had. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Erica. So I think on cannabis, you're right. The party is not what it used to be in terms of ability to make money. And we can reflect that. I think that's already partly in the document, but we can, as we're editing, we can read that just to show that it's declining in its economic potential from what it might have been. And I don't have a good sense, Shannon, you might, about the collections gap as it relates to sort of how much that is driven by the fact that we have a certain kind of collection policy with residents versus how much of it is
I think, we're not changing the policy, right? We're not, or recommending they change their policy. And the policy is, as Erica said, that we do not charge residents anything above and beyond whatever their insurance requires, like the deductible. So if you have a deductible to take an ambulance and you owe your insurance company for the deductible, then we will bill for that. But if it's above and beyond what your insurance policy requires, that is the policy of the town, that we are not going to charge residents for that. So I don't see that anything we have in our recommendation is asking to change the policy in any shape, way, or form. It's increasing what we're billing to insurance companies for the services and making them in line with what's happening. And honestly, it's a moot point because it's already been done, right? It already went before the select board and you guys already approved it. You guys being Tom and his peers. And so it's kind of a moot point at that point anyway. But we should be looking at, of what we are billing, are we getting the most revenue collections out of that? And Christina, you have your hand raised to talk about another topic or the same topic, but what Christina did figure out in her research was that we may not be collecting as well as other companies on what we do bill. So we're not asking to bill anything more than what we are existing, but to be doing a better job with the actual collections of what goes out for billing.
I apologize if I misunderstood the recommendation.
No, it's a good point anywhere. Again, it was something that definitely came up during the select board discussion. So when we changed the rates, who are we changing them for? Is it changing for everybody? And there's sort of detail about which contracts have already been negotiated and we really couldn't modify the rates, and which we could. And so it wasn't an across the board change, but it did bring things into line with other communities. Christina?
I was just going to move on to the executive summary, and I just had a couple of, minor edits. So like for the first high priority recommendation, where you're talking about the energy efficiency, I just added the phrase after, so the part of the contract with Amoresco or by other means to reduce long-term energy uses, just so that we're not tied into just Amoresco's presentation, because there could be other, obviously there could be other things. And the one thing that I noted on here, and I had mentioned it to Valerie, but there's nothing school specific on this high priority recommendation list. And I think we, at a minimum, need to acknowledge that if there isn't going to be something that says the school department needs to, blah, 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 blah. Because I feel like we're going to get that question.
So the schools would be tied into consolidating the
True.
consolidating. So maybe we can make that more explicit.
Right. Right,
few-
indirectly, there's some things, but you know, like we call out ambulance, we call out, you know, trash, we call, you know, there's a few areas, even health department, I think might be called out specifically in here, but nothing specific to the schools. And so I feel like at minimum, we should just acknowledge that why that is.
Yeah, I guess not to put you on the spot, Valerie, but is there anything from the schools that I think in general, the conclusion we've come to is that there are not high potential efficiency gains, but are there any that are sort of interesting enough that we may want to note them in the summary?
I mean, it's tough because the benchmarking data shows only a few areas that are sort of higher. And those areas are things that are related to our infrastructure. So like our heating or our building specific positions are tied to us having 9 buildings. So, you know, part of our feasibility study that we did last year is that discussion of, are there efficiencies if you consolidate 2 elementary schools into 1 larger elementary school? But in the context of a budget task force report where we're looking for efficiencies, I'm not going to propose building a multi-million-dollar school in order to reap efficiencies to save a librarian. Right. So like, I don't know. I don't know how to go around that. I'm open to anything. I just think that that's sort of where the data has been showing us. But I agree. I don't want it to feel lopsided. But I just don't know how to sort of rectify that.
Well, one thing we could do, and this is a little bit oblique, but the Amoresco recommendations for the energy efficiency project basically has 2 chunks. One chunk is everything that will pay back under the normal terms of the contract. So the town basically wouldn't put any money in, and the infrastructure investment, which would be about $7 million, would be paid for out of the savings over 20 years. And then there's another part which really relates to the Abbott roof, which includes replacing the roof, replacing all the faulty air handling equipment and HVAC, and putting solar on that roof. That's a big project. And it's probably going to be dammed up behind the process like we went through recently with the state funding authority for school roofs. So for those who aren't following this closely, there's a big reimbursement opportunity through, you'll have to remind me which agency it is, Valerie, but when you redo a school roof, but there's a whole process you have to go through leading up to that. So it could be that we could highlight, if we want, that the schools could take an active posture towards maximizing the support received for an Abbott roof replacement, because that unlocks the ability for us to do all this other energy related stuff, which has benefit.
Can someone remind me too, because I just haven't had time to dig into the Amoresco report recently. My understanding was that some of it would be sort of a upgrade of our I'm going to call it like our temperature controls, right? So that they would be more centralized, because that was also one thing I remember from talking with facilities, was that all of our buildings are sort of ad hoc temperature controls, and they're not speaking to each other, and it's not easy to sort of optimize them. So if that's embedded in the Amoresco report, that's also would be an efficiency for school utilities.
Yeah, that is part of it.
Okay.
I can't remember the number exactly, Dan might, but it's something like $10 million of expense related to replacing the roof, upgrading all of the HVAC, which is aging and falling apart at Abbott. If you've got a student at Abbott or know someone at Abbott, or not, sorry, WA is what I'm talking about, Westford Academy. If you have a student over there, or you're just over there, you know it's been sort of a shambles. And then there's a PV project that could be part of that too, which would definitely be an improvement. So, okay, why don't we think about that a little bit? I mean, it's not exactly like an efficiency gain per se, but it is an important step, I think, that will fold into our overall town green strategy. Okay, so Christina noted, I guess we'll think about how to make it explicit where we think there are opportunities in the schools and where there aren't, just so people understand that's been covered. Okay, very helpful. If you have any comments from here, so I sort of think we're going to be done early today because the main objective now is to provide whatever supports we can to kind of completion of the editing process. So let me put a pin in that. Valerie, do you have a comment first?
Yeah, just when I look at the sections, one thing that I thought we talked about last week, but I just need your help remembering what we were going to do with that section on guiding tenants.
Yeah. So let me make a note of that, and I will take a crack at that. Our philosophy, I think we agreed last time, was that we wanted to reflect sort of what we actually did. Those tenants are excellent tenants, but I think many of us felt that we hadn't we'd sort of taken a very fact-driven sort of financial research approach. Some of those tenants are sort of more like the guiding principles that the select board gives the town staff in forming their budget. It looks a lot more like the document we give Kristen at the kickoff of every budget season, which sort of reflects the intents of the policymakers. I think what we did is a little bit different than that. We sort of just took a very fact-driven approach. So I will take a crack at that piece.
Yeah, I think we put like a few bullets in the executive summary that were kind of related, but I'm not sure if it's the full gambit of what we wanted to put in that section or not. But we did talk a little bit about our process in that new executive summary.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. We could either make sure that that's complete enough in the executive summary and then not have the guiding tenants, or we could decide it's better to keep it separate and build that out a little bit more. So point taken. Christina?
One other thing that it just hit me was in our again in the high priority recommendations, dispatch isn't listed in here, and that's definitely kind of one of the bigger, mysteries as to why we're so high. So we may want to consider adding that.
So that was actually in there, Christina, and then we decided that because it relates to personnel sort of so directly, we wanted to give Kristen a chance to think about it and maybe talk with staff and give us a little bit of guidance there. So
gotcha.
It's definitely on the action item list, but anything that points too directly to an individual person, we wanted to kind of
that
be
makes
thoughtful
sense.
about.
All right, as long as it's still in the back of people's minds. Okay.
Yeah, we'll make sure that it gets addressed somehow. We'll just accept some guidance from Kristen about what's most sensitive, I guess. Okay, so what from here? So I think Valerie has agreed to be editor-in-chief. I think she has Amy and Shannon and myself available to help. But in order to sort of limit confusion, I think what would be best is, as you're doing a read-through, and I think the document is in a good shape now to do a read-through for everyone who has time. There's some data points that are missing and some things that need to be cleaned up, but overall it's in pretty good shape. If you have comments, please read through and please put all your comments in an email. And if you could send your comments to Valerie or the group of us, that would be very helpful. We ask for your understanding that if you've ever edited a big document like this, you know that sometimes you'll get totally opposing recommendations from different people. So I'm sure that Valerie will do her best in thoughtfully including things, but just up front, if there's a thoughtful suggestion you have, there may be a reason that doesn't end up in the final document, and it has nothing to do with the quality of the suggestion. It may just be that there's lots of different input coming from different directions. So I'll volunteer and see if anyone else wants to. There are a couple sections that probably still need a rewrite, either because they're full of blanks or they're maybe a little bit outdated, or so I don't want that to fall on the editor's responsibility. So if you're willing to do a rewrite, meaning like if Valerie says, page 34, that needs a rewrite, it's not good. Just let all of us let Valerie know, and you may just get an assignment like, hey, can you take a look at these paragraphs? It doesn't read clean, or it's self-contradictory, or something. Christina, was that a volunteer hand? Okay, great.
Yeah, I will.
Erica, thank you. Okay, well, good. Looks like everyone's up for that. So that may happen too. You may get if you'd read through and send in your suggestions, thank you. And then if Valerie or one of the other people on the editing team, shoots you a note and says, hey, look, this needs to be fixed. If you could just do it. I don't think any one assignment would be more than a paragraph or a page. So, I don't think anyone's trying to work over the long weekend. So, if it's possible for you to do that in the next day or so, a couple of days, I know it's a big document, so maybe you can't get through in a day, but that would be pretty helpful. Hopefully we're just putting finishing touches on it on Tuesday, and we do hope to send it out to the 3 boards on Tuesday. So what might happen in between then and in the final presentation on the 18th? Certainly if we find mistakes, we'll improve it. If there are other things that come up, we can make final edits, and then we'll submit the final version to the packet, which will go out typically the Friday before the meeting. So some number of days before the 18th, we'll have to agree that we're at final and publish that in the packet. And we'll talk about what we actually want to do on the 18th in just a second. But first, let me ask Shanna her question and any other questions about the document.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I know the only real thing that's missing from our piece, Tom, I think, like a complete, is whether or not we have enough information to update the pay-as-you-throw section. Because we've now changed our direction potentially with the trash contract. So I just wanted to call that out. I don't know if we're there yet to be able to fix it, but that was one section that needed potentially a revamp.
Yeah, I took a quick pass at it this morning. So
Okay.
you can decide if that looks okay or not, but you're absolutely right. That needed to be fixed. And there were a couple others that got called out that were just outdated. So I can't remember what the other one I edited this morning, but there may be others too. So Vibhu?
Yeah, no, Tom, I just want to tell Valerie and Christina, I am available till Saturday. If you need any kind of help in graph, tables, anything, I am off from work. From Saturday, I am traveling to Korea and China. So please just message me if you need anything. I am free. I have nothing to do in next 3 days. So
That's great. That's generous, and safe travels to Korea and China. I was in China 2 weeks ago, all over China. Okay. Any other questions just about the document or where we are from here in terms of closing things out? I think we're in really very good shape. I just want to, as a side comment, we're still on this committee together, but it has been a pleasure working with people who are so dedicated to the work. Just what an enormous amount of work everyone's done. So really impressive. And it's already had a lot of impact on a couple of things in town. And anyway, I think it's a great contribution to the town. And so very impressive amount of contribution. Okay, so on the 18th, I guess we'll have to do, actually I haven't thought about it too much, but I think we'll have to do is probably, if we're planning for like a 90-minute meeting, we probably need to have a 40-minute summary deck. We really hope everyone in the committee will actually read the document, but this is really for the public because a lot of people in the public won't have an easy way to wade through this. So we will try to pull together, I guess that's probably like a 12, 15 slide summary that will cover, here's what our charge was, here's what the process we used was, here's some of the findings. We'll sort of recap what's in the document. I think it was when we did our listening session piece, it really helped to have multiple voices. So I think what we'll try to do is break apart the pieces again. So there's, 5 or 6 presenters, each handling a couple slides probably. And I don't know how much in advance we'll have that. I guess we should make sure we have a meeting. What day of the week is the 18th, Dan? Do you know? I don't know why I'm asking you. I can look at my calendar.
It's a Wednesday.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll do is have a meeting, stick with meetings on our regular drumbeat and have a meeting that day, and we can just walk through what we're going to do that evening. And we'll make sure that whatever we're going to present is done, say, a day before that, so you've had a chance to look at it.
We'll also have a meeting next Wednesday that if this report will be sort of in draft form and in hands of others, there shouldn't be too much more to talk about. So
yeah, I think maybe we'll make an
sketch through some slides.
Oh, that's a good idea. So we could use that time to talk about slides. Okay. Well, why don't we stay flexible, and depending on how exhausted we are from finishing the document, we may proceed and have the meeting, or we may skip if we need a little bit of time to do slide prep before we're really ready to go through that together.
Tom, do you want me to post it just in case? We have to post by Friday.
Yeah, please. Why don't we go ahead and post
Okay.
it, and we
Okay.
just as we did a couple weeks ago, we'll make a call about whether it's productive to meet or not. Christina?
Just a quick question about the slides. Are you how are we dividing? Are we dividing this up? Is somebody just going to take our previous like the previous slides and maybe just sort of beef them up as with further information, or I just want to know if I need to work on a slide or not, I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, let's we can decide that now. I think probably what we would do is as you say, start off with what we had and then fill it out with what we've learned. We might say, like, if there's a lot of like graphics prep, then probably if I'm sort of making the outline for this, I might actually just block it out and then ask the people who might be presenting it if they're willing to take it on and actually make a finished version. So I guess stay tuned. It could be that we'll ask for your help on individual slides if it's more than just, text bullets. Valerie?
I haven't thought too much about this yet, so this is sort of half formed, but I would think that we almost need to pivot a bit from the outline of our previous presentations, which was here's our group organization and what each subcommittees were working on, and almost more mirror the outline of our report, and kind of use those sections to dictate our slides, which feels like more starting from zero a bit in terms of instead of beefing up what we have, which I think was what you said. It feels more like we'd be mirroring and picking out some bullet points from each section in the report.
Yeah, I think you're right. The ARC probably will follow the document much more closely. So
Sorry,
why don't we
meant to lower my hand. Sorry.
No problem. Yeah, so why don't I take a high level crack at this maybe after we are confident that we've got everything we need done for the document. So I'll just try to create an outline form that will roughly fit in the time slot that we've got, and then we can react to that, because I think I haven't spent any time on it, so it'll be a little bit more productive if we're reacting to something that's a little bit more structured. Shannon?
Just another thought onto what Valerie was just saying is maybe the focus point is taking that list of efficiencies and revenue and maybe focusing on the supporting facts to those pieces, because we've identified that those are the 10, 12, whatever they are, most important things that we kind of brought out of the topic. And maybe part of it, the big meat and potatoes might be, here's why we're recommending this thing. Here's the supporting data that we found that leads us to that recommendation, and maybe focusing in on that. Just a thought there.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. Again, if the audience is the public member who probably doesn't have the opportunity to process the whole all 80 pages of the document, you'd want them to have a basic understanding of why we're recommending what we recommend. So that's a good idea. Erica?
Sorry. Yeah, I agree with everything that Valerie and Shana were suggesting, that, getting the document, the briefing package in place sooner than later is a good thing, and starting from zero. And I'm just trying to get a handle on the pace of that creation. If you were talking about making the straw man soon, then that would allow people with assignments to get creative and then have something to show at next Wednesday's meeting. And I'm just suggesting that might be a good pace, because that way we can have a week then to tweak it and make sure that it's, rehearsed and appropriate.
Okay, why don't we do that? Why don't we set a target of creating the straw man outline with slide assignments, say by the end of the week. And so we'll circulate that, and people will have that to chew on. I don't think there's a need to cram over the weekend on it. I think we'll have time between now and the 18th, but it'd be good to get people thinking. So let's do that. And then there'll be a little bit of a question. I think we discussed before a couple of things we might offer to the various boards about what this committee does post October 18th. One was an offer to basically provide some sort of ongoing accountability to the recommendations. So offer to write a report on what's been done in pursuing these recommendations, say in December, sometime later in the year. We could pick a time, but that's one thing that might be helpful because these recommendations are going off in a lot of places and it may not be easy to track it all. So that is one thing we could offer. And then I think we also were going to offer to do maybe an explainer WestfordCAT style video or some kind of thing that could be publicly shared that basically just, it would be kind of a version of what we'd be doing with the 3 boards, but it would be, maybe produced a little bit more cleanly or edited down a little bit more carefully, just so they could do the public education piece. And again, there's no advocacy to it. It would just be explaining what the budget, challenge items are, what the recommendations are, what efficiencies we identified. So all the things that are in the report. I don't know if there's anything else that people think we may want to offer up that might be valuable to the boards from here. Christina?
So I'm not sure that we should offer this up, but one thing that I was thinking about is our list of peer communities, how we had the 2 different, like the town and the school list, and how, those lists, at least I personally didn't feel like the town list was maybe the best list. So maybe that works into a recommendation. I don't really know, but I feel like some more thought should be given to that in the future. Do we want to combine lists? Do we want to revamp the list? It's something about the peer communities, because everything stems from that, and everything we did stemmed from from those lists. But again, I don't know that necessarily has to be this group, but maybe that's a recommendation to the select board to sort of relook at this.
In some cases, those communities are embedded in union agreements, which doesn't mean we shouldn't review them. It just means we may want to have a couple conversations first to figure out, because we did say we're going to migrate to this improved benchmark set that changes, a couple towns leave, a couple towns enter. There may be some cases in which I don't know if there's any cases in which we'd have to bargain that. I don't know, Dan, if you know, but in some cases we can just say we're using a different benchmark.
Yeah.
In other cases, we kind of need buy-in.
I do think that needs to be bargained too. We have to agree on which are our market communities. So it's a little difficult to change, but we could always have those discussions with the unions as well.
Yeah, I guess one thing that would be interesting to think about is if we did the experiment of coming up with what we think is a better, more representative benchmark set, how different is it than what we have? Because if it's actually has a lot of overlap, we might say, okay, it could be incrementally better, but rebargaining this might be more of a chore than we want to take on. Or it could be, it actually is a pretty different group and we think really would be more valuable to us, in which case it's worth the effort to engage with the unions and rebargain.
Right. I guess that's sort of all I'm saying. We didn't really look past it, right? We had these historic lists and said we just don't have time to even look further, so we're just going to keep going. But it's probably not a bad exercise to come up with what we think is a more appropriate list or lists, and then take it from there or not. Again, just everything was everything direct, comes from those lists. So I think we want to make sure that those lists still make sense, even if it's just an exercise of, yep, we looked at it and yep, looks great, still valid, keep going.
Well, if there's a subgroup we can put this on the agenda for next time too. If there's a subgroup that has an interest in taking that on, and it wouldn't have to be on any particular timeline because we wouldn't be trying to change it for the purpose of this report. I think it would be valuable because it's, you're right, everything kind of hinges off it, and it's much better if there's a defined logic to it than if it's just, historical artifact. So that would be valuable to the town, I think. So Dan, if we could get that on the agenda for next time, we can bring it back and see if anyone feels like kind of as a follow-on project they'd like to engage in that. Valerie?
Yeah, Christina made me think of this, which is great. Because I think that her idea almost falls into like a reflections bucket, right? Like, what are some things that we learned as we went through this process that we want to that are not tied to dollars, but are either recommended practices or things we should think about as a town as we sort of move forward, right? Like one thing, we had that meeting a couple weeks ago about how we talk about how we talk about the town and school split, right? Like maybe we have that recommendation or that reflection to de-emphasize that percentage of new growth, right? Like, because that's another data point that gets shared and is maybe confusing because it's not reflective of everything. And another thing I was thinking about on the school side was how volatile our out of district expenses are, and whether that we start almost sharing that at a higher level at the way we bucket some of our non-negotiables sort of overall town expenses like OPEB and things that we don't have control over. And here's this thing this bill that just has to get paid. And removing it from the school budget would make the rest of the school budget more predictable, right? Like you kind of roll over and account for more level services if you have taken that out. Anyway, that's a very specific thing, but I guess I would ask that as all of our members are reading through the report and you're reflecting on the last, I don't know, 4 months, whatever this has been, this journey, right? That if you have sort of process reflections, that we could try to capture all of those and see if they merit a discussion or merit even like a smaller section in the report to say, here are some things that we think that we just kind of made us scratch our heads as we went through, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So Dan, could we also add reflections agenda item? I'm just thinking about the 2 economic wins we've already had. You don't want there to need to be a standing budget task force for us to do some sort of benchmarking of fees or make sure that we've captured all the vendors that need to be part of our bid process, which is basically what happened with the waste contract. Is we didn't take a look at who the providers were with our local towns and ensure that they participated in the bid. We basically said, bid's open, and if you don't put in your bid, then you're not part of it. And that didn't serve us. Actually, it would have been much better if we'd gone out and made sure everyone who was providing local services were in that. The other thing which had come up was, I think some towns take a slightly different approach when they're doing budgeting and sort of start from more of a fixed allocation between, I don't want to say between town and schools, but among town and schools. It's something we could think about. How do we want to communicate? Do we want to start with sort of a guiding principle when we're doing initial budgeting? Or do we want to communicate a little bit differently, to your point, Valerie? Because I think there often has been a lot of confusion, even amongst people on the boards, what the allocations really mean. Shannon?
I think that's all an excellent idea, Valerie. I think as we're all going through the document one more time, I think we should come up with bulleted points. Maybe it might be something we want to add at the bottom of the executive summary that we just put together to say, like, here are recommendations and here are some reflections. I think to your point, I think there's partially like as part of the budgeting process, and when Kristen's going out to departments, we should be asking them, when's the last time you benchmarked your data and your fees, right? And what did you use the appropriate benchmark communities? Like, those are things we should be asking on a regular basis, so that maybe we're ahead of things like ambulance fees, permit fees, things like that we maybe are a little bit behind on now. And I think to the trash point too is, have neighboring towns done what we're trying to do, and reaching out to other towns like Chelmsford and be like, we know you just bid, who did you use, how, and really maybe increasing that communication. So I think it would be great for us to continue to maybe come up, not that we want to add more to what we're doing, but in our task item of reviewing, I think, I had reflections too, and I think Tom talked to you from like the real estate perspective. We don't have our properties cataloged so that we could see if we needed to what was for sale. And I feel like that's something that we should be doing better, things that like that we might be able to incorporate somewhere.
Yeah, that's another great point. So the town owns lots and lots of pieces of property all over the place, and many of them are treasured green spaces and have restrictions and provide a lot of value, but there are some that are kind of odds and ends bits that don't really suit any particular civic purpose that we should at least ask, does the town want to continue to own them? if they're not really fitting into any kind of strategy that we have. So that's an interesting thing coming out of this that I'd never really thought of before. Okay, well, great adds to our process. And I think the idea of having like an ongoing process improvement, you know, section, maybe there's 4 or 5 recommendations, or maybe there's more. I think that's a great add. So let's not try to do that. Well, what I was going to suggest, let's just leave that till next week. We kind of discuss what we've come up with and then write the piece to insert it. That means it may not be in the initial draft, but I think that's fine.
I think so too, because I don't expect dollar amounts with these items, right? So it's more like as we organize ourselves and come to some sort of closure that we're processing those internally.
Okay, good. Okay, well, I think we are in pretty good shape. So Valerie's the editor-in-chief. We'll be here to support her. You may get a request to rewrite. We hope you'll have a chance to read through and send your comments. We'll try to get an outline of the slides with slide assignments for the presentation on the 18th out by the end of the week, just so people can have it and begin to think about it. We'll talk about sort of reflections, and maybe this benchmark selection fits into that reflection bucket too in our next meeting. I think that puts us in pretty good shape. I don't know, does anyone else have anything that we should make sure we talk about today as we launch into the final document stretch? Okay, I think unless anyone else has anything, I at least feel like we've got a complete plan and could go ahead and move to adjourn. Any objections?
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, second. Okay, all in favor? Okay, thank you all. Thank you all for your hard work. Thank you, Westford, for staying with us through this. And we will see you next week in our meeting. We'll go ahead and, sounds like we're definitely going to have the meeting next week. So we'll at least get together and talk about reflections and maybe other things too. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Have a good rest of the day.
Bye-bye.